Assassin's Creed is not the same as what it used to be. The games still come under the exact same title, but the audience that Ubisoft are trying to reach are no longer the exact same audience of what they did reach with the original games. And this has led to Ubisoft making some massive changes to Assassin's Creed, some of them good, but in today's video we are looking at the ways in which they ruined the franchise. But before we do get into the video, if you enjoy the content here and want to see more from me, then make sure that you do hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every single week we're uploading the latest around all Ubisoft titles, which does of course include Assassin's Creed. So if you do want to stay up to date on everything, then make sure you are following the channel. Getting back into the video. With this franchise spreading across 15 years, there will be some changes, and there has been a lot of good changes within the years. But we're looking at those which has ruined Assassin's Creed for many players. The first way, making the game way too big. Now for some, they like the idea. They're able to spend the exact same price as what they were able to do for previous games, but now they're getting a game which is twice, maybe even 3 times as long in story length, as well as a much larger map size. But this has also brought on many other issues. It's all good on paper having a much bigger game for the exact same price, and you think you've got yourself a very good deal, but it leads to there being issues when it comes to gameplay. There is much less time spent on polishing the game as what it could be if it was a lot smaller. And with all the efforts that have been put in by developers to make it as big and as vast as possible, may not even lead to that much when it comes to someone actually playing, especially when there is an incredibly low audience retention on that game. That's what we saw with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is still seen as a success within the franchise due to how many copies have been sold. And there's still quite a lot of players which are there that are sat playing this game and also going through the DLC. But in terms of the overall community, for the amount of people that bought it to the amount of people that completed it, it is incredibly low. The second reason, the open worlds now are way too open. Now this kind of links to the previous point, but we do really need to touch home with this one. Not only are the worlds so much bigger than what they used to be, but because they're so big, it's also taken away from the key point which most fans found entertaining, and this is parkour. We can all agree that with Ubisoft, they are the best with parkour within their games. There is not a single game company which comes close. You can see many compilations here on YouTube for the amount of people that have created recordings and edits around them just being able to parkour around the city. But recently there's been a change. Ubisoft have actually been taking animations for parkour out of Assassin's Creed since Assassin's Creed Origins. The worlds that they're trying to create are so much bigger and not dense like they used to be that there's no need for certain animations. In fact, parkour is no longer the #1 way to travel, it's most likely on horseback. And let's all agree that being able to travel on horseback is definitely not polished. As it is the #1 way to travel, it surely should have a lot more attention put towards it with animations, but that's not the way it works. There's still more animations for parkour, and you do parkour less within the game compared to you traveling on horseback when you probably travel more on horseback. The third reason is that there is a lack of female protagonists. Now technically this isn't something Ubisoft can ruin because they've never ever pushed a sole female lead. But they have certainly ruined it because of them failing to actually evolve and push on. There's certainly some great female characters within the Assassin's Creed franchise. Just look at Evie, Aya, and Cassandra, but none of them were able to have their own game based around them. Both Evie and Aya had their roles reduced in favor of Jacob and Bayek, whereas Odyssey designers wanted Cassandra to be the only playable character, and that was going to be the case in the beginning, until they were forced to add Alexius. And this is something that doesn't look like it's gonna change anytime soon, despite the backlash that Ubisoft have encountered because of it. Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is the 2023 title, is going to include Basim, which of course is coming off the back of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which technically is actually before Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but you get my point. And then of course after that, we've seen Ubisoft start to tease titles which are going to be released, and with Assassin's Creed Red, Assassin's Creed Hex, it's just way too soon to tell. But if they did include a female lead, it's not gonna happen until the very least of 2024, and I still don't think that it is going to happen. The fourth way in which Ubisoft ruined the franchise is by endlessly pouring in microtransactions. Now for a lot of players, this is of course a downside, not just to Assassin's Creed, but to every game in general. With Ubisoft, they really got hit hard by this. And when I say they got hit hard, I mean they tried to drain their players out of every penny possible. And this hasn't just put a sour taste in players' mouth for Assassin's Creed, but has been every other title that they've published over the last 5 to 10 years. More and more microtransactions have been added, and it has led to them making more money, but it's also led to there being a lot of very poor games. It no longer seems like the main focus is to create a good game, but more of how many microtransactions we can fit within them. And it's really took a turn for the worse when things were already bad after Ubisoft announced NFTs. Now this wasn't applied to Assassin's Creed, but it does show you the lengths in which Ubisoft were trying to go to. Number 5, the lore and story. Assassin's Creed was a narrative driven game. That's how it started, and that's why fans love the franchise. The first few games followed a relatively concise story about Desmond Miles, helping avert an apocalypse brought by the people before. But after that was wrapped up in Assassin's Creed 3, things quickly fell apart. Not only for the modern day, which has always been hit or miss depending on the game title, but also the main story. There has been a few attempts to include the lore as part of the story by going further back in time, but this has led to a very overarching plot, way more confusing and even worse. Now, if you're not up to date with all the lore, that's perfectly fine, because most of the newest players that are part of the franchise don't have a clue about it. And if they were to spend the many hours reading through, they would most likely be confused and ultimately be put off of every Assassin's Creed. Number 6. Meaningless content. This is something that's always been included as part of Assassin's Creed, so it isn't something that was good, which Ubisoft then ruined to absolutely make it awful, but it is something that has progressively got worse because of how they've changed the franchise. There has always been activities within the game which are somewhat meaningless as well as very repetitive. Just look back in some of the older Assassin's Creed where you would have to just be nearby someone to listen into a conversation. These are still missions today and they've been completely overdone. But now with content, you need to go through these missions over and over again just so that you can build up XP or even collect resources. It just became about using the exact same gameplay mechanics that players weren't really enjoying as part of a narrative driven story to then have to constantly repeat them over and over and over again just so you can grind through the game. You would have extremely repetitive tasks like taking over forts and collected loot just so later, after hours of grinding, you can get to an interesting part of the story. Ubisoft even said that this was a problem with Valhalla, and the creative team has said that they're downgrading for the next installment, which of course is Assassin's Creed Mirage. And they will hopefully provide a lot more content that is actually enjoyable within the world, as it's a lot smaller. Because it's a lot smaller, going back to our previous point, they can actually spend more time in reworking the content that is available as side activities, as well as the main story, without needing to constantly repeat the exact same tasks over and over again. And the final point for this video at number 7 is of course the modern day sections. Now, depending who you ask will depend on which modern day section they actually enjoyed. I've been around since the very beginning and I actually liked Desmond Miles, but I know that there was a lot of people at the time who found him to be completely arrogant and just did not like him as a character. That's perfectly fine, but since then Ubisoft has gone full circle. They've tried so many different ways in which they can include modern day as part of the story. It started with Desmond within modern day, then it was Desmond inside the Animus with Subject 16, then it became just Desmond within modern day. We then went through a phase with Assassin's Creed Black Flag where it wasn't Desmond, but there was still modern day activities, it was in first person, and it was you that was supposed to be the main character. And then that was completely scrapped and it just became voices as you was talked to for a cutscene for about 2 to 5 minutes depending what was spoken about. Incredibly boring. Then it was completely scrapped, and most recently they brought in a new character being Layla. Layla, of course, following a very similar path to what Desmond did, but now of course as a female character. And Ubisoft yet again will be making this change at some point within the future. Once Assassin's Creed Infinity is available, which is not a game but in fact a hub, they're taking away the modern day sections yet again, and going back to the point in where you're the main character. Quite frankly, Ubisoft doesn't have a clue what they're doing with modern day sections. The best thing that they can do is either go back to what it was originally or just completely scrap it. It might actually be a lot better to scrap it considering most players do not like getting pulled out of the main core gameplay just to learn about what's going on within the modern day conflict. It's annoying, and as already discussed, it does nothing for the story because most people don't have a clue about the lore or story, and that's really down to Ubisoft making it as confusing as possible, with them just adding more and more with each title that passes, making it more and more confusing. They're just making it up as they go along. But these are 7 different ways in which Ubisoft has ruined the Assassin's Creed title. If you want to know how this franchise is going to evolve within the future, then I highly recommend clicking this video right here. Ubisoft has not only announced the next title being Assassin's Creed Mirage, but they've also named every other title following that. So if you do want to know about everything, make sure you watch this video.